Here we go. Woo-hoo. Once again. There you go.
Okay. Good morning, Timothy. And well, thank you very much for the nice dance behind the scenes. It was a pleasure watching you, a sight to behold, you know. So, quite a few people have expressed their willingness to see you dance. So, maybe we can talk about that at some point in the future. But good morning to everybody listening to us in Clubhouse and also watching us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. It is the 218th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One with Timothy Langley, the CEO of the longest-standing government affairs consultancy in Tokyo, right? Langley Square.
That's
so
right.
Thank you very much, Timothy. You are reporting from a beautiful spot today again, but I'm not going to disclose it and I will leave it to you. So it's over to you now.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to Tokyo, our briefing on what's going on in Japanese politics, live from Tokyo. This is our 218th episode, Maya. That's more than 4 years going strong. Every Sunday that we brief everybody on what's going on, and we hope we satisfy your curiosity for understanding and delving into what is Japanese politics. It's so mysterious and so mystique and a little bit difficult to understand. So that's why we launched this program 4 years ago. So thank you very much for tuning in. Today I am broadcasting from the good ship, the deck of the good ship Grimm's. I've got a tarp over me because the rain is starting a little bit. Last week I got caught off guard and we got a tiny bit wet, but now I've got a full tarp up. And so you might hear the pitter patter of rain. Maya, the yen closed out amazingly at 143.59 to the dollar, or the dollar to the yen. That strengthening hasn't been that strong or that robust since early in 2024. So there is volatility going on there. I'm going to get into that a little bit better. But we all understand that with the Trump tariffs and the geopolitics that are going on, it's a very volatile time right now. Mr. Prime Minister Ishiba and Donald Trump spent time on the phone following our briefing last Sunday, and they got on the phone on Monday. So I'm glad they did that. They talked for 25 minutes, and you know, with people who live in Japan and do this kind of business with translators, you're not going to spend, if you're 25 minutes in a meeting, there's a lot of going back and forth, no matter how good the translators are. But they did reach some sort of an agreement on pursuing this, and the Prime Minister promised to send a delegation that will be arriving in D.C. on Wednesday. The expo starts today. Today is the first start of the 6-month expo in Osaka. There's a lot to look forward to there. There are a little bit of snags going on with the ticket sales and the pace of launching this, but it is going to be a dynamic exhibition, and from what I understand, Vice President Vance will show up there. Governor Koike has announced a plan to launch for government workers a 4-day work week, Maya.
How about that? Wow,
Yes.
That's big news, isn't it?
It is big news. She's going to initiate this. I don't know when it's going to start, but she has made this proposal for a 4-day work week to address the birth rate, the declining birth rate. So if it works only for government workers, then the government workers will have a lot of offspring, and I don't know what that's going to do to the economy, more government workers. But it is an innovative idea, and she is always pushing this. You remember a couple of months ago, she came up with the plan to send for Tokyo people to send their kids overseas to do a work study or home study or a university degree, in fact, maybe a year abroad, and offering stipends for that. Maya, over the last week, Japan has made significant progress to join with NATO and to accommodate some of the issues with NATO. They're planning on joining the NATO Security Assistance for Ukraine. So there was a little bit of indecision there during the first couple of well, it's almost 2 months now with the Trump administration, but the Trump administration stance and the Biden administration stance that Japan followed assiduously is in flux. But they've come forward now and they've said with NATO we want to be a little bit more ingrained. This follows right after a visit by Defense Minister Hagset. So you can see that there's a little bit of integration going on here. Japan should take more of a role in military and military assistance, and they're being pushed on that. So this last week, Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, came to Japan, met with the Prime Minister, met with the Defense Minister, and so there's a movement going on in that direction as well. Trump this week paused the tariffs. I think everybody knows that. It was big in the news. He enforced the tariffs, 25% on Japanese automobiles, 20% on everything else, and he paused that for 90 days. The markets went up and down. It was just a very volatile week. The tariffs that are in place and the tariffs that are paused, there's a little bit of a difference there. There's a universal tariff on 10% from April 5th, and that's for all exports or imports to the United States from Japan. Reciprocal tariffs of 24% from April 9th, that is the Liberation Day tariffs, and sector-specific automobiles, steel, and aluminum at 25%, but the postponed ones, all tariffs up to the baseline of 10%, while negotiations continue. And those negotiations, as I said, the team will be arriving in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. Anything that's in transit stays exempt for until April 27th. The trade delegation will be in D.C. Following the phone call, the 25-minute phone call that I mentioned earlier. It is led by Houze Akazawa, who is a member of the lower house. He comes from Totori, and a vice minister for international affairs, a bureaucrat, Atsushi Mimura, who is a diplomat and very in charge. Yen. Possible stimulus package is now being discussed. We heard a little bit about that. There was a little bit of a snafu. As you remember, the budget had not been completely settled about this time last week, and the Prime Minister kind of went off the cuff and said he was thinking about it. It created a big problem before the passage of the budget, but now it's back on track because we can talk about that now because the budget's passed and everybody is concerned about the Trump tariff. So there's a lot to get into today. I'll try and limit my discussions so that we can just talk about the hot topics, and then we can get into the Q&A, Maya. I'm tongue-tied today, aren't I? I love it when your mic is off.
All right, kind of, yes. Have you had any coffee this morning, by the way?
Yes, I did. I had 2 cups of coffee already. So maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why, or maybe the coffee was decaffeinated. Who knows, really? Okay, so thank you, Timothy. And before we continue with the body of this episode, I want to say thank you to our first sponsor and the very... just give me a second. What? Okay. Yes. So the first sponsor is Kanchu, or as they are known also online, Kanchu.com. There you can talk about buying and selling real estate in Yokohama, real estate investment and property management projects. You can talk with James Howell, who is here on the picture of the slide, or you can also talk with anybody else who is in the company there. You can reach out to them. They can meet your needs either in Japanese or in English, so the language barrier is not a problem. And if you are thinking about having any project in the area of Yokohama, please do not hesitate to reach out to James. He will be there for you. So thank you very much for your patience, Timothy. And now let's go into the details and talk about Japanese politics. What happened? I guess that once again we'll talk a little bit about external politics as well. So all the power to you.
Thank you very much. So Maya, we are 10 weeks away from the upper house election, And a
Mm-hmm.
lot is building up to that. We have been talking about there's a certain faction, not just within the opposition parties, probably unified with the opposition parties, get Ishiba out, we want a new prime minister, but also within the LDP. And we've discussed here on this program the delicacy of moving on that sort of a scenario. If you're going to do that, you need to do that quickly. Only 10 weeks left so that the new prime minister could come in, reevaluate things, try and make more people like him and like the LDP under his leadership so that the LDP wins more seats in the upper house election than it loses. And it doesn't look well. It depends on how the Trump negotiations go. The prime minister himself isn't going, but he has appointed two individuals to lead it. But in fact, it's like one of those things that everybody wants to be a part of, especially if it's a success. So I don't know if it's going to determine the prime minister's length of office, but I think the general decision is let's stick with Mr. Ishiba. If you're in the opposition party, you want to fight against somebody like Mr. Ishiba because he's not that dynamic. He's in a weakened government. He has to share the power with many of the opposition parties, with Ishin, with the Democratic Party for the People, with in particular the Constitutional Democratic Party. And these negotiations span everything. For 30 years, the LDP didn't have to be concerned with what the opposition party said on any matter. They could listen to them politely, which they usually did. They gave them a little bit of quarter. But when it came down to deciding, they decided their way or the highway. But now it's not that easy. So as a consequence of that, Mr. Ishiba appears to be even maybe more indecisive or a weaker leader than he probably normally would have been under the post 1950s LDP capture of the entire government, where most of the time we were talking about the factions and who was running the factions and who was on top and who had the most numbers in their factions. That combination is gone now, and this prime minister is struggling to accommodate that. So he does look a little bit weaker. He's probably open to more criticism. He is, in fact, a little bit indecisive. So it really complicates things. But the yen is important. We always talk about the yen first thing in the morning because it's a temperature read of what's going on. $143.59 to the yen. It has strengthened in this way. It hurts exporters. It helps people here because the imports are a little bit less expensive, but it does cause a lot of concern. The Fed, the reason for the strengthening of the yen is that the Fed has signaled a possible rate cut due to cooling inflation in the United States. And so, as we all know, when the United States sneezes, Japan catches a cold. So they follow what's going on with the Fed. That has a lot to do with the currency market, and the currency market has a lot to do with the rest of the economy here. Also, last month, we reported here that the Bank of Japan has announced the end to the easy money policy, the negative interest rate policy, and they're not going to have any more easy money for corporations, mostly for corporations that need to borrow money to make ends meet for a brief period of time. So this is the first time in 17 years that it's not quite a rate hike, but it is a shift in the philosophy of the Bank of Japan under the governor Ueda. So we're seeing this, we're noticing this shift that's going on here. The administration of Donald Trump is almost 2 months into it. So you're seeing a lot of changes throughout the entire economy. Those two factors of the Fed thinking it's going to reduce interest rates, and the Bank of Japan a little bit concerned about the easy money policy and moving away from that, they enhance the yen attractiveness as a kind of safe harbor. So more money comes in as it looks a little bit safer. There was a kerfuffle with the United States and the Treasury bonds earlier this week. So it looks like people are losing a little bit of confidence, or maybe the signal was sent to the Trump administration. If you screw around with us, we're going to be selling our Treasury bonds. The vast majority of Treasury bonds are held by China and Japan in the trillions. So this signals to other markets that the United States is not that safe or reliable as a currency market or as somebody to peg your currency on. So it is vacillating a little bit, and the Japanese are benefiting, or the Japanese yen is benefiting as a consequence of that. The Bank of Japan has also mentioned that they're worried about a little bit of speculation, where people are speculating on the yen dollar relationship and purchasing or selling, and they want to calm that down. That volatility is really something that upsets the Japanese Ministry of Finance, and they're trying to tap that down as much as possible. So their verbal pronouncements are heavily weighed and watched carefully. They have an end of the month meeting that happens at the end of this month and the first day of May, which is 2 weeks away. So this month is really coming out. And the other reason why Japan is looking good in terms of currency is that there's so much geopolitical risk, not just here in this region, but also globally. There's a lot of geopolitical risk. Money wants to find a safe haven. It used to be that the United States was a really safe place. Buy treasury bonds, it was always solid. And now, in contrast, the yen is looking a little bit more stable, or at least it's safer. It's perceived as safer. So it's a double-edged sword, as you know. The cost of imports rise, and this increases domestic inflation. But it rattles exporters who are concerned about the cost of the value of goods that they sell. The higher value upsets their forecasts that they've been calculating. So it really upsets banks. It upsets the exporters. It upsets the market. I think mostly what the Bank of Japan wants is stability, not volatility. And as the yen approaches 100, it's 143. My gosh, we were talking almost 160 about 2 months ago. So as it approaches that, the temptation for them to come in and intervene to tap that strengthening down begins to rise. I think it'll be a little bit stable for the next 2 or 3 weeks, but let's look forward to the Bank of Japan having their end of the month meeting in 2 weeks. President Trump and Prime Minister Ishiba had a 25-minute call on Monday. The negotiating team is being dispatched from Japan. The president and the prime minister discussed that. 25 minutes, you're not going to be able to talk about a lot. You're not going to cut a deal. You're just going to set up the tone and maybe a couple of niceties. But Japan is a huge trading partner to the United States. So in the 25-minute call, I don't know what they could do, but I understand that the president was cordial to the prime minister, as you would expect, and he looks forward to giving Japan some preferential treatment as a consequence. But prior to the announcement of the 90-day freeze, the bond market, the treasury bond market, began suffering from huge volatility. China and Japan, as you know, are the largest holders of treasury bonds, and they began reducing their holdings, which sent a little bit of a shiver. I think it was sent as a signal. And global confidence in the U.S., in particular, leveraged hedge funds. They act very quickly on this kind of a movement. And so when China or when these big investors take a stance like that or suggest that, they leaped into action. And so it causes a very quick cascade. So there's a lot of nervousness that goes on there. But let me see. The United States has treasury debt in the treasury bonds in the amount of $3 trillion. And one of the problems for the administration is servicing that debt. Japan is the largest holder of the $3 trillion in debt that the United States holds in treasury. About 30% of that is held by Japan. And over the last 30 days, they have sold off about $6 billion in treasury bonds. So they go to great pains to say it wasn't as a result of the Trump tariffs, but I think it's inescapable that it was. And it did produce the desired effect. The very next day, the president announced a 90-day freeze, and then the markets went crazy again. So there's a lot going on there. The prime minister selected two people to go to be on this negotiating team, and it's very important who he selected. He selected Ryosei Akazawa, who is a member of the lower house from Tottori. He is a member from a contiguous election district in Tottori to the prime minister. So they've known each other for a long time. He's actually a product of the Koizumi revolution. He's a Koizumi child. He, let me see, he was a transport ministry bureaucrat before he entered politics in 2005 with Mr. Koizumi, born in Tokyo. He went to Cornell for an MBA in 1991, obviously from the University of Tokyo. So he did his undergraduate in University of Tokyo and then went to, as they do, a renowned foreign university for an MBA for a higher degree. This is his first kind of cabinet position as Minister of Revitalization. He's got a whole list of projects that is under his ministership, and I'm just going to mention them to you now to give you a kind of an idea of the breadth of his responsibilities. But this is his first shot as a minister. He is the Minister for Revitalization, for New Capitalism, for wage increases, for startups, for social security reform, for infectious disease crisis management, and for disaster management agency preparation. You know that they're under consideration to form a new agency called disaster prevention. And if you're watching some of the news or reading some of the newspaper, you've noticed a couple of stories coming up. You know, if Mount Fuji explodes, the wind is going to carry the ash this way, so just be aware of that. Or if there's a Nankai Trough earthquake, you know, this many thousands of people are expected to be killed, and it's, you know, we're doing preparations for that. It's a little bit upsetting. It's not supposed to be suggestive, but it is interesting that it comes out at that particular point of time. But that disaster preparation agency, he is spearheading it now. It hasn't been created, but it is under consideration. He is the one that was fingered by the prime minister. Go to the United States to talk with Donald Trump. Take this team with you and come back and bring home the bacon. He is joined on the ministry side, a career bureaucrat, by Atsushi Mimura, who is also a pretty sterling individual. Once again, University of Tokyo, international public administration from the French University, ENA, the École Nationale d'Administration. He is 35 years as a career finance bureaucrat. He was appointed in 2024 as Vice Minister for International Affairs and is the top currency diplomat. So we talked about the dollar-yen currency fluctuations, and this is the top guy. So the currency is a huge deal with that. And he went to right in the middle of the global financial crisis. He was sent to the International Court of Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. So he is a pretty heavy hitter. The finance minister, Katsunobu Kato, said that although Japan holds U.S. Treasury bonds about $1.2 trillion, that is used for potentially exchange rate intervention. So one of the things that Donald Trump said he doesn't like about Japan, they're manipulating the market, they're intervening heavily, and we follow that, and it does do that. But the finance minister said, you know, these treasury bonds are not held, and we don't trade on them. We don't exchange them or use them for retaliatory or diplomatic purposes, which is the suggestion all this week. But it's only for exchange rate management. So there's a lot to be expected there. The team leaves on Wednesday, as I said. So maybe this time next week, I kind of doubt it, but maybe this time next week we can give you an update on what progress they've made. But I expect that they will be in Washington, D.C. for more than a couple of days. In the meantime, if you think the prime minister doesn't have enough, he is in heavy negotiations with the opposition camps on dealing with the Trump tariffs and also dealing with their pet issues too. So there's a general acknowledgement that the economy is going to suffer, that the Trump tariffs are going to come in one way or the other. He's going to impose them. There's no escape there. The best that you can do is make the best of the situation, but we need to figure out how to deal with that. The economy is already sinking. We talk about, the number of goods that are going in for higher price increases. We talked about 1,500 of them just announced this last week or 2 weeks ago. So the idea is to limit the impact of the tariffs that will be coming. So there's no guarantee that in 90 days it isn't as it was portrayed already, but I think it'll be a much milder hit, but it's going to be a hit one way or the other. And so the lower house and the upper house both have their own independent budget committees. And there was discussions. So you remember maybe 2 weeks ago, we were talking, the hottest topic was, the prime minister had given, gift vouchers to 15 members of the lower house who had visited him just immediately after the budget had passed. So he wanted to thank them and thank you for having dinner with me at my residence. And as you leave, they're going to be giving you a bag that's got some gifts for you in it. And that caused a big brouhaha. That is now, it seems like it's ancient history. Nobody's talking about that anymore. Now what we're talking about is forming a united front, including the opposition. So the prime minister really has to deal with a lot of balls in the air, dealing with Ishin, dealing with the Democratic Party for the People, with the Constitutional Democratic Party. And there are other parties too, but they're just not as dominant as these main three. So they all want to accommodate the prime minister to the degree that there's reciprocity in him dealing with them. So for those who are in the upper house, and particularly if you're up for election, you're relying on your spokespeople. If you're an upper house member and you're up for election in June or July, you're telling your party leader who is in these negotiations, give people more money, make the economy sing, even if we have to go into further debt, because my neck is on the line. So give people something to be hopeful for. So those negotiations are going on, and I think there is a discussion about having a supplemental package, a relief package. Those are in heavy discussions now, a supplemental budget, and to stimulate the economy. There is widespread discussion on cutting the consumption tax. So as you remember, a couple of years ago, the consumption tax went from 8% to 10%. And it was projected to continue on that march, maybe up to 15% in a few years. Now that is being tapped down. Currently, the consumption rate is 10% and 8% for foodstuffs, and so different people have different ideas. They, the reason why foodstuffs stayed at 8% and they didn't go to 10% was because of the push from the LDP's coalition partner, Komeito. And Komeito now is saying, reduce the foodstuffs even more because it helps people. Just cut the foodstuffs, make it to zero. That would help the economy. The Democratic Party for the People are saying the 10% overall consumption tax, reduce that to 5%, and that's going to kick off the economy. The Constitutional Democratic Party is of the mind that you put the consumption on foodstuffs, just take that out and keep the consumption tax at 10%. Komeito, as I said, just cut it out, cut out the 8%, give the food for without any consumption tax. And the LDP is saying, wait a minute, already 50% of the budget, they passed the most tremendous budget, 115.2 trillion yen 2 weeks ago. And now they're talking about coming up with a supplemental budget that is going to be reducing the intake of the country, and therefore making the budget even more debt laden. More than 50% of it is based on Japanese bonds and debt. So it's not fiscally responsible, but they have to deal with these realities and accommodating the opposition parties. So there's a lot of push behind it. And let me see, the the impact that this has on the upper house elections cannot be underestimated. If the people receive a supplemental package, they're going to be a little bit more accommodating, and whoever's idea is accepted by the coalition government, because it's not the LDP just calling the shots anymore, it has to be by a unified force. Then the prime minister will either suffer or benefit from that, but certainly the opposition parties are going to go for that as well. The other thing that's interesting is that Mr. Tamaki with the Democratic Party for the People, you remember in October, his party went from 8 to 28 members, huge. And so he is something of a darling. He is maybe considered to be LDP light. He's LDP like. He's not far distant from the LDP on certain policies, but he is attracting a lot of attention. And he says he wants to increase eightfold his members in the upper house in the coming election. So there's a lot of horse trading going on. A lot's going on with Ishin, with the start of the expo today. It's going to be a big deal. I don't know if the prime minister will visit. I think he probably should, but there's this. Yeah, I think he should, but the scheduling and everything else that's going on, I don't know if it's going to buy him much benefit. But it does look like Vice President J.D. Vance will be coming, and Ambassador Glass, who I believe is in Tokyo now, setting up his household in the mansion, and we can look forward to having an ambassador who is very close to the President of the United States. George Glass is not a career diplomat; he's a businessman, but a big supporter of Donald Trump, and his money helped get him elected. And I think as a consequence of that, he got Portugal in the first Trump administration and Japan in the second. Japan, among diplomatic posts, is one of the choices. Paris is up there, but Japan always scores very high. It's a safe and a pleasant place to live and to run diplomacy out of. But I think with Mr. Glass, the tariffs, it's going to be a little bit contentious, and also the boost of military spending. He also is an advocate of moving from not 2% of GDP, but 3% of GDP for military spending. And so if you're in the LDP, you're thinking, and you're fiscally responsible for the budget, and you're already at 50% beyond for the entire budget for the year, all of these things mounting up, it really causes you great concern. And Maya, finally, talking about great concern, April 1st, as you know, is the day that the fiscal year starts. And all of the schools start on April 1st. And also all of the students who are matriculating, they've finished high school, they've finished college, they've finished graduate school. And on April 1st is the first day that they enter their company. So there's a big recruiting process here. We all know and are familiar with that. It goes on for a year, maybe 2 years. Where students are interviewing with various companies and trying to get a secure job, and then they can relax a little bit and play a little bit more, before they graduate. And then they graduate and they enter the company. This year, the number of people who have joined the company and on day one have resigned is astounding. And over the last 2 weeks, so today is the 13th, right? Over the last 13 days, the number of people who have joined companies and have said, this isn't for me, this isn't the way it was portrayed, is quite remarkable. So it's something that's really beginning to attract a little bit of attention, I think, for a lot of Japan watchers. You're familiar with maybe the term Shinjinrui, which was a term for the millennial, not the millennial, but the Generation Z a couple of years ago. And this is a kind of a new phenomenon. So the interesting thing, Maya, is that a company was started that will help you resign from the company. So you call up the company, you register with them, and they're going to contact the company or the manager or whoever, and they're going to resign for you. You don't even have to do anything because you're worried about the confrontation. You're worried about getting yelled at. The reason why you're not going in is because the guy yelled at you in the first place. The name of the company is called Momuri. Momuri,
No, momuri.
which
Okay,
is kind of like I've had it, momuri,
right.
forget it, right? And I thought it's an interesting phenomenon that yeah, it probably existed in the past. I hadn't heard of it, but this year it is something of great comment and commentary. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. If your company or your experience is suffering a little bit from the new generation of recruits, it is not limited to Europe or the United States or other places in the world. Japan has its fair share of it too. So that's it for me, Micah.
Okay, thank you. That was really oops, just
Momuri.
momuri. What an enlightening name of a company. Well, and it also, once again, tells you how how nice the sense of humor of the Japanese is. Okay, well, before we go into the Q&A session, as always, we go through the routine, and I want to say thank you to our other sponsor, and the other sponsor is Houze. You have seen them here, well, our advertising of them here on this podcast. You can find them online at houze.co.jp or connect with them via email. You can also connect with them on LinkedIn by talking with Hana or Shizawa Howell. You will find her contact details in the description of the YouTube video. Houze is based in Yokohama, and they do projects in the fields of custom home design and construction. They also do commercial building construction. So if you have anything that you're thinking about, that you want to build a house, your custom made house, or a construction, commercial site, please talk with Houze, please talk with Hana. You can talk with her once again, either in English or in Japanese. And the company, the staff there, they're very responsive. They'll do their best to meet your needs. So thank you very much for staying with us this long. Timothy, I know that I surprised you. Okay, so apologies for this. We're moving into the Q&A session now. We received a question, actually, the very first question, maybe this morning or last night, from Byron Johnston. So I'm going to read it
Hi,
out to
Byron.
you. And yes, I think that we've got quite a few questions about the negotiating team
Yeah.
of Japan. And the first question and then some others coming that came later are about this. So Byron says, given the complexity of demands from the Trump administration, not only on tariffs but also on currency and military costs, and given the well-known silos and rigidity of ministries in Japan, how
Hmm.
will chief negotiator Mr. Akazawa, a known confidant of PM Ishiba, coordinate those multiple responses? Also, won't Japan's overall responses be very delayed because of these factors?
Yeah, you've got to kind of, thanks for the question, Byron. um, you've got to imagine that the Trump administration, in the last press briefing, they said 70 countries have approached them for negotiations. So there's a team of, it's not just the Japanese team, which is high powered, but there are other countries that are going in with their finance minister, with their really brilliant guys that are going in to talk. And the United States administration, how many people are you going to have that are going to be able to facilitate that sort of negotiation? I mean, this is tough negotiation. It doesn't happen over 2 or 3 days. So, yes, I'm very curious how it's going to go myself. And it's not just, the tariffs and steel and automobiles. I think more importantly, it's the more difficult non-tariff trade barriers. Those issues that really prevent sale and robust trade, just because there's a rule or a regulation against it. It's not a tariff. It's, the reason why we can't do it is because, our stomachs are longer than your stomachs, and so we can't accommodate that kind of beef. Or the snow is different. Japanese snow is really different, so it likes Japanese skis. It doesn't like the French skis, that sort of thing. But those are kind of ridiculous funny comments that were actually made in the trade wars of the past. I think it's going to be different now, but I think a lot of the thorny issues are going to be on the non-tariff trade barriers, and that's much harder to accommodate. But yeah, who knows, and who knows how quick it's going to happen. And it's not just the two that the prime minister has sent. Mr. Hayashi, chief cabinet secretary, has also said, he did his policy MBA. It wasn't an MBA; it was graduate school at Harvard. He wants to also be involved. The finance minister, Kato, has also said, I'm going to have the final say. I'm going to be talking with these people. I know them much better than Mr. Aizawa does. Many of the people in Washington, D.C. are wondering, who is this fellow? He's a confidant of the prime minister. I've never heard of him. And in the negotiations with the opposition parties this last week, so the prime minister has opened his doors. He sat down with them. He's had discussions. He's listened to their counsel. And many of them have said, why are you sending him? He, I guess he speaks English. He did an MBA at Cornell, but, why didn't you send Motegi? Why didn't you send somebody else who has real chops? And so there's, he's fighting a battle. No matter what he does, somebody's not going to like it. And it is kind of, how successful anybody could be in this environment now. The Trump administration is hell-bent on leveling the playing field. They've already told people what their expectations are. And the kind of the tone is, you're supposed to come in and offer something, not be forced to do it. Just come in and offer a package. And, if we're good friends and you've, accommodated us in the past, you'll probably get something of a pass and a quick resolution. I think that's probably how it's going to happen, because the economy can't take this. Just the uncertainty, it impacts us here in Japan too, that business can't plan forward when they don't know what's going to happen. And usually the fluctuations between not just Japan and the United States, but region-wide and globally is rather stable. And this shock, you can dislike President Trump or like him, but it is inescapable that his impact globally is just remarkable. So let's see how that shakes out. I don't know. I think Mr. Aizawa is going to have a tough time, but he could have a success and be a prominent figure in Japanese politics moving forward. This is a big deal.
Right. Okay, so we'll continue with questions also that came in the very beginning of the briefing today. And they're once again about the tariffs and the negotiation process. So they came from Cam, who says,
okay.
How will the 90-day tariff pause potentially impact the upper house election in July, since the deadline falls around the same timeline?
Yeah, that's a great observation. I don't think the 90 days was made with any consideration for what's going on in Japan. I think it's too sophisticated thinking, and Japan doesn't dominate everything. It's one component. But it is interesting that it falls somewhere around the time of the election. So yes, it could be. It's kind of like the Osaka Expo. If the central government is a little bit kinder to Ishin and to promoting and to encouraging the Expo, then Ishin's going to benefit from that. Osaka will benefit from it, but Ishin will benefit from it too. And similarly, with these Trump negotiations, the LDP could come up smelling really nice because they negotiated a fair transaction with the United States. And now we have clarity and business can move forward. And by the way, the yen dollar exchange rate has been stabilized. And so there might be a lot to celebrate. In the meantime, though, we've got the supplemental package, the stimulus package. Are we going to keep gasoline cheap? What are we going to do with the rice prices and the inflation that's pretty rampant? And once again, this last month, the real wages, although wages have increased because of inflation, they have decreased significantly for 2 months in a row. They've been on a steady decline, but it is worrying if you're in the government to try and make people feel somewhat comfortable about what their livelihood is like and how they can feed their kids or take a vacation or buy a car, that sort of thing. So things are really beginning to stagnate, and they've got to somehow generate that enthusiasm in anticipation of the elections in less than 10 weeks.
Right. Okay. Continuing along the same lines. So once again about negotiation. If Ishiba is successful in negotiating a deal with Trump and the negotiations conclude earlier than 90 days, what impact might this have on the elections and Ishiba's future?
I didn't catch the last part. What impact is this going to have on what?
On the elections and Ishiba's future.
So, yeah, that's a hard one. I think we can say with some certainty that Ishiba is going to stay as prime minister until the elections. Um, and the reason for that is, um, yeah, there are a couple of reasons for that, but he is the horse that we selected. He's the horse that we should ride on. And if he makes mistakes, then and we suffer, let's take care of that after the election. Um, we don't have enough time to select a new prime minister. And once again, if there was a race for replacing Mr. Ishiba, we've got this whole rigmarole. 9 people showed up the last time. It would just be too much victory for the opposition party. See these guys, you're going to vote for them. They don't even know who their leader is, and they don't like their leader, and there's infighting there. So don't vote for them, vote for us. And by the way, in this stimulus package, you got Sanmayan or Gomayan because we lobbied for it. We promoted it. So everybody wants to be a part of the success, and nobody wants to be a part of the failure. But yeah, the Trump tariffs and the victory of settling that, I think it's going to be portrayed as a victory. I think anything better than what we have right now is an improvement. So I think coming back from DC, there will be something to celebrate. And Japan and the United States are close. We're intertwined, and there's no reason why we should be there should be any animosity between us. So I think the quicker that is dispelled, the better. And we've got a new ambassador, and who knows what's going to happen with defense spending. But the Japanese economy needs to get back on its feet, and we need more stability here. And then
Well,
that will reflect in the election.
right. The question is, though, whether those negotiations can be turned into a win-win situation, right? Because the American administration also needs to boast about success as well. But I mean, one-sided success is not going to do the deal anyway. So we'll see. Okay, and the next question is, what long-term trade strategy do you think Akazawa is mapping, and do you think his team is looking for easy concessions? What
I
might
don't know.
those points of agreements be?
I'm not familiar with that. I know, just loosely speaking, what the orders from the prime minister are. Come in and get stability here. Donald Trump has said several times, it's somewhat awkward that Japanese sell their automobiles in the United States, but the Americans don't sell their automobiles in Japan. There's an imbalance there. But I've worked with General Motors in the past, and it's extremely difficult to sell a General Motors car in Japan. But I think it's mostly because the preference of Japanese consumers. The Japanese manufacturers are well tuned. They know the philosophy. They know the needs of the Japanese market, and they're very attuned, and they're very responsive to that. And they make probably one of the best mass consumer cars in the world. So the fact that they do well in their home market is undeniable. The fact that they do well in foreign markets is admirable. But the fact that the United States doesn't sell enough cars here, they've tried and they've given up. They've gone to China instead. GM had a huge presence here maybe 20 years ago, and after the 9/11 Twin Towers attack, they decided that Japan wasn't as good a deal as going to China. So they went to China and made a lot of money selling cars in China. But their footprint here is just tiny compared to what it used to be. So Part of it is effort, part of it is investment. So yeah, the United States likes to blame other people for not being able to sell their products, but um, countries like Japan have a counter argument too that does carry some weight.
Right, thank you for this. And because we are on this topic of trade and trade policies, so from Hiroko-san on LinkedIn, we have a comment. I learned that rice will be imported from the US
It
and
is.
mixed and will be mixed with the rice produced in Japan. But the price would be not as low as we could expect. I'm
Mhm.
concerned what the price would be for the rest of the year. Rice is a staple food for Japanese people, and the prices are important.
I think California rice is already available on the shelves. I think that
Mhm.
that trade has already started. Um, the Japanese consumers, once again, they are very particular. They have a
Yeah.
new brand of rice, a new genetic version of rice that comes out almost every year, and it's always a top seller. And California rice, it's a little bit different. It looks the same. For maybe the uh, it sounds corny, the unsophisticated palate. So the Japanese have a very sophisticated palate with regard to rice. For you know most people, you taste different brands of rice. You really can't tell that much of difference. But since it's a staple here, an ancient staple, the Japanese are very peculiar about their rice. And yeah, having California rice at a cheaper price is very attractive. You've got to feed your family. You've got to, serve food at the restaurants and that sort of thing. It's a pretty critical. But from my understanding, California rice is available, but the prices, yes, the wholesalers are jacking up the prices to make it almost like the Japanese rice in terms of competitive pricing, but they want to sell the Japanese rice first. They want to keep that premium price on there. So probably the prices are inflated and it will receive the attention of the Trump negotiators, I'm sure.
Yes, there was also some news recently that the Japanese government has a food export policy, that they're planning to, I don't know, maybe triple the exports of rice. And it's really, how can I say, mind-boggling, because at the moment Japan is experiencing shortages, and of course shortages not only in the agricultural produce, but also labor shortages. So the question is, what kind of policies will be put in place to achieve those goals? And I don't know whether we can talk about this now, but it's really a fascinating topic.
It is fascinating. And already, I think most of the fish stocks, the produce from the ocean, is not generated by Japanese fishermen. I mean, there's a huge proportion of foreigners that are involved in that industry. And with rice, um, more and more, it's not the small plot lands where mom and pop or grandma are farming, a couple of acres. It's more the bigger lots of rice and the mass production. But it's funny that the Japanese food policy would encourage the export of rice, and the only thing I can think of is that their high premium rice is being exported to. Um, I don't know. It seems like the Japanese market would be able to absorb it because they're not self sufficient even in rice production, and
Right.
the availability and the prices of rice right now, it's almost at a crisis level.
Indeed, yes. And Hiroko-san, yes, I actually have nothing against California rice. And Hiroko-san says, I personally love California rice because it is Japonica. So this is the Japonica rice, yes. And right, but still there are a lot of things going on here, like personal tastes and governmental policies, exports and produce and everything else. Now let me
Maya,
read. Yes.
your mic got a little funny.
Oh, really?
Now it's good.
Okay.
Now it repaired.
Okay. I'm sorry for that. Well, now I'm moving on to the next question, and that question is from Manabe-san. So Manabe-san writes: Is it possible for a group to be formed within the LDP that is based on new policy groups and is different from the traditional factions and factional
Yeah.
politicians.
Yeah, you probably have a little bit more insight on this, Manabe-san, than most people. But groups can be formed. There's an old joke that you've put, three Japanese in a room, and 5 minutes later, you've got five different groups. Five different permutations of groups. But I think in Japanese politics, particularly within the LDP, in the absence of factions, people are looking for uh, the strength of grouping. Groupings have strength, and Japan and Japanese politics is basically more group conscious than individual, geared toward the individual or the sterling individual. It would be really difficult. It would be wonderful if we could have an Elon Musk in Japan, but it's highly unlikely that the society and the education can produce somebody like that. I mean, you would just get beat up the entire time you were growing up, to reach that sort of pinnacle. So it's the strength of Japan is their collective working together, their focus on harmonizing voices and taking care of everybody's concern and accommodating them, and not telling somebody just to shut up or do it my way or the highway. Um, but the political groups are seeking for some balance. The LDP is really fractured now. The largest and the only faction, official faction, is the Aso faction. They had a tremendous Benkyokai on Friday, where the former Prime Minister Aso made his speech, but he is not a contender for Prime Minister. I think he understands he's too old for that. He's already done that, but he will be involved in selecting the LDP leader, obviously. But yeah, there's a right side of the LDP and there's a left side of the LDP. And the more that we deal with some of these contentious issues, for example, the surname issue, or the same-sex marriage issue, or some of the difficult issues that are confronting Japanese society right now, groups are beginning to band there, and perhaps we are in the beginning of a complete rewrite of Japanese politics, which is not dominated by the LDP. Therefore, it's not dominated by factions, but it's dominated by a coalition of opposition parties, the LDP, and eventually it's a kind of a coalition government. I think that's the direction we're going. If the LDP doesn't do well in the upper house election, that means that they don't control the upper house, they don't control the lower house, and so there might be a shifting of who is going to be taking the leadership. It's not going to be an LDP person, and then the committee posts and some of the cabinet positions are beginning to shift. And once you begin that momentum, and I think we're in that area where momentum is beginning, where the 1950 scenario of LDP politics is way behind us, and I don't think we'll ever go back to the way it was for a long time, if ever.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And a comment about the resignation agencies here in Japan from Hiroko-san. Hiroko-san, thank you very much. It is an explanation, actually, about this. A resignation agency is a company in Japan that assists employees in resigning from their jobs, handling communication with employers on behalf of the employee. And as of today, there are about 100 such agencies in the country. Well, thank you very much for the stats, because we didn't have them. It's always nice to have people help us, people in the audience who are better versed in some topics and many other topics as well. And also, we've got another question from Cam here. Do you believe that Takazawa's team will visit Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach, Florida?
So the center of gravity in U.S. politics is not based in the White House. It's not based in Washington, D.C. In fact, D.C., I think, is almost like a war zone. It is totally democratic, and there are lots of, I mean, the judges, the people who live there, the people who run the government. And I think Mar-a-Lago, where the president lives, has become a center of driving politics and making deals and being with the people who are driving it. So not everybody's even always in Washington, D.C. So what Cam is suggesting is that this center of gravity, is that acknowledged by the negotiators? Is a visit going to be made there where, the critical personalities are located? They live there, they're doing their business, they fly to Washington, D.C., rather than people, getting a townhouse in Georgetown. They probably do both, get a townhouse in Georgetown or DuPont Circle and work in D.C. But it's, yeah, I think if they're well advised, they'll probably be visiting Mar-a-Lago. But they've got their work cut out for them too. If they're there for maybe 5 days, cutting off and going to another city would be, I don't know. People do it all the time in America. I think the Japanese are less familiar with that style, but I hope they have good advisors, and I can find out, and we can talk about it next week, Cam.
Great. And I don't know, my line of thought may be really that of somebody who is very naive, but I guess that they need also an invitation to visit Mar-a-Lago, so they cannot just decide by themselves. And the invitation should be approved on both sides. So I don't think that it is a one-sided decision anyway.
No, not in Japan. It's not one-sided. And if in your budget request you say, I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. for 4 days, and before we return, we want to go to Florida to meet with the influential people, and maybe on the return trip, stop in Las Vegas and visit Disneyland,
No, there should be,
very serious.
They need justification for that expansion of budget. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And with this, it seems that we have gone through the comments and questions for today. I know, Timothy, that you are eager to take your beautiful boat out of port. I believe.
I was out all day yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Sailed
Okay.
to Misaki, the tip of the Yokohama Peninsula. Maybe a 2.5, 3 hour sail. Beautiful day yesterday. And then sailed back last night. So spent the night on the boat and got up fresh for today's briefing. But the funny thing, when you cross Tokyo Bay, it is like the highway of ships that are coming in and out of the port. They come into Yokohama port, they come into the Tokyo port. You see containers, you see all sorts of cargo ships. And yesterday, the traffic was very light, unusually light. And I think it might be because of the impact of the Trump tariffs, that the trade is not, the ships are not coming in. If you're a Chinese cargo ship and you are loaded up with cargo that's going to the United States, and you've got 124% tariff that's going to be imposed now, I don't know what you're going to do with that product. But this is really, really hurtful for Chinese manufacturers. And we're very much in a battle between China. If we're going to limit them or close off the markets or increase the prices of their products so that other manufacturers have an even shot at producing the many thousands of things that the Chinese labor produces for us, it's a real shock to the market. And the Chinese market is going to have reverberations, unlike the ones that we're suffering from here in Japan and South Korea and in many of the other countries. China is really having a hard time.
Right. Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll be following this issue again and on the way forward as well. We haven't gotten any other questions. There is a comment from Diana Green. Wonderful. You get to sail. Lucky you.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm very fortunate. Maya, one other thing is that the progeny of this program, Japanese Politics One-on-One, was Tokyo on Fire.
Yes.
It was a video production that I did with many people involved. Ambassadors would come, we'd interview ambassadors. We talked about politics, we talked about law, we talked about crime and the economy. More than 300 videos were produced in Tokyo on Fire. If you don't know about it, go check Langley Esquire. That's the name of the YouTube channel, and Tokyo on Fire is the name of the program. And we were told by YouTube just this last week that we surpassed 1 million views.
It did, yes. Well, so congratulations to you and your company, of course, to the team that created all those videos and everybody who participated in them, helped with the content. And of course, once again, that's a great achievement. What a wonderful goal to reach. And I believe that quite soon, probably you'll get to the next 1 million. So,
well, those numbers don't include the numbers that we have produced on this program. This program is sponsored by Japan Expert Insights. That's your platform, Maya. And we've been going strong for 4 years every Sunday. And I don't know what the numbers are there, but we are well beyond 1 million views for the content that we produce. And I'm so much appreciative of what you've done, Maya, in promoting this program. Thank you.
well, thank you back. And well, great. Thank you so much for this. Once again, we'll give a shout out to our 2 sponsors at the end. And have a great Sunday, a beautiful weekend, and a bright new week.
Talk to you
See you
soon.
next week.
See you next week.